Back to our conversation. Labour shouts sleaze. A lot of people say police, and I can't actually see what the row is there outside of Westminster where people get very excited about it. But let's come to other matters. And today, and this is of huge importance, the Climate Leaders Summit. The Prime Minister will address that. And in a glimpse of what we'll hear, these aren't his direct words, but he will push the theme that the world must turn the tide on climate change or be remembered as the generation that sold out the planet. Goodness me, strong words. Business and Energy Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng joins me now. Can you give us a little more background to what we will hear from the Prime Minister later today? Secretary of State, good morning.
Very good to see you, Nick,
Good to see you,
and
sir.
to hear you. Very briefly, this Earth Summit Day is actually extremely important because a couple of days ago, the Prime Minister announced that our carbon emission targets, by 2035 would go from 75% to 78%. And what that means is that we use 1990 as a base year. So you look at the carbon emissions we had in 1990, and we're trying to reduce them down effectively to zero. And we're hoping to reach a 78% reduction from 1990 levels of carbon emissions by 2035. I'd hasten to add that today, in 2021, in Britain, we've reduced our carbon emissions from 1990 by 45%. So it's a journey that we've already embarked on, and now we need to just get more pace and more focus in trying to hit the target. And what the Prime Minister will be doing today is really encouraging other leaders and other countries to set ambitious carbon reduction targets.
Secretary of State, what do you and others, and indeed Prime Ministers and leaders, do to ensure this isn't just a lot of hot air? How can you ensure direct action comes as a result of all these people getting together? Secretary of State.
I think that's really tricky, Nick. But what I always say about this, and I'm an optimist, as you know, is that we've actually done a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, we've got still a huge way to go, but this isn't something that we've just started 2 days ago or a week ago. As I said, since 1990, we've reduced our carbon emissions in the UK by 45%. And the way we've done that, in particular, is we've taken things like coal off the power grid. I mean, you and I, dare I say, are old enough to remember coal being a huge part of our national life, a huge part of our power, and it was a big part of our economy and our politics. Even as early, or rather as late as 2012, 40% of our electricity was coming from coal power. And today, that's only 2%. So we're already making changes that are reducing carbon emissions. The other area, if we look at transport, is very notable. Electric vehicles, we're seeing them springing up all over the place. There's huge consumer interest in electric vehicles. And I think if that continues, again, we can reduce carbon emissions. So a lot of the things that we need to do are already happening. The challenge is to do more of it. And in more areas.
And a word on this, and if you don't know, I'll fill you in on details, but I sense you probably do rather. This is particularly poignant or significant because a coroner yesterday recorded for the first time the death of a young girl living down in southeast London, and this was due to air pollution. So this, I imagine, you probably know the case. This is Ella Adu Kissa Debra. I would imagine you've probably heard of the case, Secretary of State. Doesn't this underscore why it is so important that political leaders get something done?
Absolutely right. I think air pollution is just a very clear way of demonstrating that this is a really important issue, and people dying of air pollution is something that we haven't seen in Britain for 60 years. Obviously, in the 50s we had smog, but we had strong laws that prevented that happening, and it's a really important issue.
Okay. While I have the benefit of you on the line, on other matters, are you convinced that the Prime Minister behaved appropriately in all his dealings with Sir James Dyson?
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. We were in a situation where there was a crisis, there was a pandemic, thousands of people were dying, and the Prime Minister had to act very quickly to make sure that we had ventilators here in the UK. At the time, as you'll remember, one of the big problems they had in Italy was that they didn't have ventilators. So the Prime Minister took the view that he would move heaven and earth, those were his words in the House yesterday, in the House of Commons, to try and make sure the ventilators were made here in the UK, and he managed to do that. And he would do it the same again. I was very interested also, Nick, to hear Tony Blair say that he essentially would have done the same thing. He didn't see what the issue was about. And I understand that one of Labour's shadow ministers herself said that Keir Starmer would have done the same thing. So I think it's very odd to say on the one hand that they would have done the same thing as if they'd been in office. But at the same time, it's somehow an issue of sleaze. I don't understand.
But are you concerned that it would appear a lot of businessmen and women seem to have access to the Prime Minister through his mobile phone number? Do you hand your number out regularly to business people that you meet? Are you more cautious? How would you describe that, Secretary of State?
Nick, I think one of the things in a democracy that we have to be is very accessible to people who are employing people, all people. I mean, constituents contact me on my mobile phone number. And we're generally quite accessible compared to other countries, ministers in other countries. And I think in this particular instance, because the context is really important, there was a real need to make sure that we had ventilators here in the UK. And as I said, the Prime Minister did all he could to make that happen. And if that means having direct contact with people who produce these things, I think that makes sense.
I guess, lastly on this aspect, Secretary of State, is this, though, a little bit of a drip? Because while I think many of my listeners are probably with you as regards the ventilators and Sir James, we have got the Greensill scandal still in the air. We've got the Conservative chairman being asked questions about the refurbishment of the Prime Minister's flat after leaked emails suggested a donation to the party was set aside to help pay for that project. This surely does speak now of drip of sleaze, doesn't it, as Labour suggests?
I don't think it is a drip of sleaze. I mean, clearly we need to have very, very high standards in public life. And I think there were issues around Greensill. And I hasten to add that we've got about 6 committees looking at the Greensill issue. And they're going to find out, the Treasury Select Committee, I think the Public Accounts Committee, the Prime Minister himself announced a review by Nigel Boardman. We're all probing into what exactly happened with the Greensill issue. To make sure that if anything wrong happened, then we need to deal with that, and also to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. I think, in Britain we do have high standards in public life, but of course we can always try and make an improvement. And I'm very pleased to see that the Prime Minister has gripped this issue, this Greensill issue, and we're looking at a review.
How many approaches did David Cameron make to you, Secretary of State?
He made none to me. I've made this public in the select committee.
I hope you don't feel left out. There's no need to be so angry about it. There's nothing I can do. I'm very sorry for you.
To be fair to him, I wasn't the Secretary of State at the time. I was, so I don't know what approaches he's made. We looked at this within bays within this department, and there've been no contacts as far as I can see.
And a bit of a grim one on which to end, Secretary of State. Noting your business secretary, I would imagine you've had sight of a campaign that's been running in the Daily Mail about the limit of people who are able to attend funerals. And they make a very valid point that, tragically, there could be another 80,000 or so cremations or burials between now and June 21st. You'll know that's one of your key dates in the government's roadmap. And a lot of charities and others are saying that the 30-person limit on mourners is just too draconian, Secretary of State. And indeed, we witnessed it on the sad events on Saturday where the royal family obviously observed it with the Duke of Edinburgh. It's a very powerful story. Don't ruin final farewells. Secretary of State, is this something you're aware of? Is this something you're going to look at? Is it something you're going to take action on? Kwasi Kwarteng.
Look, it was a very difficult issue, Nick. And as you remember on Saturday, I thought that procession, that ceremony was conducted with such grace and dignity. But clearly, yes, it's a very difficult thing to say goodbye to loved ones in a very restricted environment. But we do have a duty to make sure that the virus is suppressed as far as we can make it. And I think we're making progress on that. We managed to hit the April the 12th date.
But are you going to look at the
partial opening?
Tragically,
we're always reviewing, Nick. As you know, we're always reviewing data. We're always reviewing policies. But I think it's very important that we hit those dates and we stick to those dates.
So you won't relax. So thousands of people can go to the FA Cup semi-final. Thousands can attend the Crucible Sheffield to watch the snooker. I could get on an aeroplane and sit next to somebody I know with due tests and all of that who I've never met before in my life, and I can sit in a pub garden with someone behind me who I've never met. But I can't go to my auntie's funeral. Explain how that works.
Well, you can if you're one of the 30.
But let's say I'm an extended family and I'm 31.
Let's put that straight. But all these rules, there are always going to be people who question
Kwasi,
some of the rules.
You and I know each other well. Kwasi, this doesn't add up, mate. This doesn't add up. You can go in a pub garden, you can have a Scotch egg behind someone you've never met in your life, you can go and watch the snooker or the football alongside people, but you can't say goodbye to Auntie. Kwasi, mate, this is wrong. Come on.
It's restricted to 30 people, Nick. And there are rules. We have to suppress the virus.
You won't review that now? You won't look at it now?
We're always looking at the rules. You know that's how that works. People are always looking at data within government and seeing where we are. But I think it was very important that we're consistent and that we hit the dates as we said. And the one thing that you would blame me for is if we relax rules and then for whatever reason that the coronavirus spiked and we had to, God forbid, go into lockdown. That would be a disaster, and you would rightly be lambasting me on your show.
Grateful for your time as ever. Thank you, Kwasi Kwarteng, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Secretary, talking about that all-important summit. It's 1 minute after 8. News on LBC with Thomas Watts.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock. World leaders will meet later for a virtual summit aimed at securing new commitments on climate change. President Biden, who is hosting the meeting, is expected to pledge to at least halve US greenhouse gas emissions by the end of the decade. The US announced a commitment to cut emissions by